Are you a property owner in Washoe County? If so, did you get your assessment notice in the past 2 weeks from the Washoe County Assessor? So this is a very important form that is oftentimes overlooked because it comes out during the holidays and it gets lost with all the Christmas cards we're getting. So what I encourage you to do is go track down this form. It should have been mailed to your principal residence. Open it up and see if you understand it. It is one of the more complicated forms out there. So in today's podcast, we are interviewing the Washoe County Assessor, Chris Sarman, and we are going over on how to understand and make sure that the county is assessing your property correctly. If you're a primary resident, you're going to want to make sure you stay around to the end to make sure you are in the locap. Let's hop into the interview. Let's go. See what we're talking about. We'll go to the top. It's the 2024-2025 assessment. So question one is, what is the tax year for the county or the assessor?
So we operate again on a fiscal year, which starts July 1, ends June 30th, right? And so we are again establishing these values. These 24, 25 values are going to be meant for and applied to the fiscal year for 24.
Starting July 1st.
So July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025 is when this value is applicable.
Okay, so a lot of people get confused why it's 24-25 because it's half. Just remember your property taxes are split up into, because of the fiscal year, half for this year and half for next year, and then the cycle starts over, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so obviously there's the assessor's parcel number, APN, anything about that? And that's just the number that uniquely identifies your parcel, correct?
That's correct. A unique parcel identification. So an assessor's parcel identification number, right? So that's all that is.
Okay, to the right of that is the tax district.
Tax district, yeah.
So he has nothing to do with that. You have nothing to do with that.
We're not the tax. No, we're not setting the taxes. We're not setting the tax rates. We're not in charge of putting together a tax district. But there are several of them, and there is some importance to it if you want to look online to see which tax district you're in, because they do vary. For the most part, they're 3.6%, right?
3.66 is the statutory maximum, I think.
That's the statutory maximum.
So if you want to know the whole list, I have it right here. In the comments below, say tax rate district. You can look this up and figure out which one you're in. There are some that vary. There are some that are in the low threes, so that might be something you're looking at when you're buying a house. Maybe you want to get in the lower tax area.
Yeah, and typically those are going to be in those unincorporated areas outside of Reno,
Washoe County.
Washoe County. So
because every city has different taxes based on what's passed in their district, correct? So that has nothing to do with this, so to keep that in mind. But that's what the rate you're taxed on. So
correct.
Send me if you want to know that, or I'll probably do a video on where to find that, because that's important. But that's not at the assessor's website. That's at the Treasury, right?
Yeah. So we don't do taxes. We don't set the tax rates. We don't set the tax districts. We're tied to assigning the value from a taxable value standpoint.
Okay, so
valuation.
Obviously, property location is, that's where your address is, obviously.
Yep.
Nothing there. And then we're going to jump right into this. So it looks like there is the previous year and then this year, correct? I mean, it shows what your prior assessment was and then your current assessment.
Yeah, so we want to showcase what it was last year, what it is this year, because everybody in their mindset is that we're a market value system. We're not, but it's still good to show what the change is so that people can understand where was I at last year, where am I at this year. I think that's just an important thing so that people can understand how the values are changing, which gives them a little bit more information.
Great. So we're going to talk about real property. So I'm looking at mine. Mine is $208,000 essentially land value. So how is land value? So how it works, correct? Just quickly go over in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you have your land value, which is the raw dirt. That's just if you didn't have anything on there, correct?
Yep.
And then you have your structure, which is the building and improvement value, correct? So you add those two together.
Yep, till right out.
But how do you come up with the value, or how does the assessor come up with the value for raw land? Is that based on what?
Yeah, so again, just to kind of summarize what you just said right there, we have a total taxable value comprised of a land value and an improvement value.
Okay.
The land as though it's vacant, right?
Okay.
So when we're looking at land value, that is technically a market value of land, but we are doing mass appraisal, right? So we're not going out to every single lot and saying, okay, well, what's this worth, right? But so we do it on a mass basis. In a homogeneous neighborhood like South Meadows, let's just say, for example, or out in Spanish Springs, where you have a lot of those tract homes, we use an allocation rate. So purchase price of a home, we say the allocation is 18-20%, and that's that land value, right? So we can see what the median sales price is of a neighborhood. We can figure out what the allocation rate is from that, and there's a whole bunch of information and studies that go behind that to figure it out. But ultimately, it is a market value. It can be stemmed from or arrived at from allocation, simply land sales, right?
Right.
Those are the best. If we have the land
Yeah,
sales
if you
and we
have
have the
land
land sales, we can show what that land is worth, and then we can use an abstraction, which is pretty rare. But we ultimately usually use the sales if we have them, or we're using an allocation.
Because there's, I mean, of the 190,000 lots, how many have something on it? Do you know that?
We're looking at about 155,000 improved, right? So there's roughly 35, 40 out there that are unimproved.
Okay. So there's not. I mean, in my neighborhood, there are no vacant lots. So I guess you're using allocation, correct?
Right. Yeah. So, allocation for that. Most likely, I could look into that
because it hasn't changed. So the thing I'm looking at mine is it's the same.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I mean, the land values are really kind of more indicative up to what the market is doing, right? If you're using a median sales price for a neighborhood, and it might fluctuate throughout the year,
Right.
but if we look at it on a 3-month level, 6-month level, 9-month, or 12-month, and then we're looking at time sales adjustments, what's the adjustment for that time period, that sort of a thing. Those are all components that go into that land value.
Great.
In addition to that, we do look at certain attributes. If you're on a busy road, there's a traffic adjustment. If you're on a golf course, there's going to be an upward adjustment for that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of different amenities that could be looked at and say, okay, through a paired sales analysis, we're showing that this view adjustment indicates 20% more than somebody that doesn't have a view, right?
And no one would even know this if you didn't hear this video. Because it's not just throw a number on there, wag it, right? Sounds like it's a complex. Now, quick question for you is, there a person in the office assigned to particular areas? So does it one person do South Reno, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we have 20 appraisers on our team here, and so that's across four different teams, right? And so throughout that, we do have appraisers that are assigned neighborhoods within certain regional areas of our market, right? Okay. Submarkets, we'll call them. So you might have somebody working in Spanish Springs, South Meadows, somebody that's working in Montreux. So we do have certain appraisers who are working those areas.
I'm familiar. And
I think that brings up a good point because they're actually on here, right? So we do have the initials of that appraiser down here on our form. So a lot of times if you call in, you call our front counter, you want to talk to the appraiser, we know who they need to talk to.
I never knew that. See, that's the tip, is that there's an appraiser assigned
to
your parcel, and that's the person you talk to?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Preferably, right? I mean, sometimes they're not here or something, but yeah, we'll get your question answered. Our phones are always on, right? Which is great.
That's awesome. So we're moving into, we got the raw land value, so that's just the parcel with nothing on it. Now we're moving into the more complex. This is where everyone gets hung up, right? It's the building and improvement value. So that leads me to another question. What is included in buildings and improvements? What's in there?
So that can be, any kind of structure, right? So most of your viewers, I assume, are residential owners, right? Or maybe somebody that's leasing or something. But primarily, we're just looking at what the structure is on that vacant land. So anything that's your house, your garage, pavers, patios, all those things, yard improvements, if you have a pool, if you have a mother-in-law quarters, if you have, fencing is that yard improvement, sprinklers are that yard improvement.
Is that why
escaping is a yard
Is that
improvement.
why the county wants you to get a permit, so that is calculated in theory?
Well, in theory,
and to make sure it's complies with the local standards, right?
Yeah, there's compliance codes to that, right? But ultimately, we do work with the building department to see what those permits are, so that we can look at through our discovery process and find out what is actually there on that parcel. It gives us an opportunity to look at it, and then
do you use aerial photos? Aerial photos too?
We absolutely do. Yeah, I mean that's a more convenient, easier way, but sometimes it doesn't tell the whole picture, right? Sometimes we need feet on the ground, we need to actually measure something or get a better look at it. But aerial photos are certainly a great tool for us. We don't have to knock on your door, right? So,
so all the improvements that are included. So this is the structure, the pavers, the shade structures, okay, so that's good. So now what it says here, I'm just going to read it so everyone knows, is it says replacement costs new minus depreciation. So that's where everyone gets hung up. So we're gonna do like a 2-minute discussion about what is in your mind, or not your mind, but what is the rule for replacement costs. So all right, so we have, what's the replacement cost of my home? How do you figure that out?
Okay, so we are bound by statute, by law, to use Marshall and Swift, right? So Marshall and Swift is a cost indexing company who provides us with the costs. So we take those costs, we apply what we have, and we put that into the system, which kicks out the value, right?
Based on square footage?
It can be absolutely based on square footage, because there's economies of scale that exist, right? If you're gonna build a 1,000 square foot home, and then you build one that's 10,000 square feet, there's an economy of scale to that, right?
It's cheaper to build. Yeah.
Right. So absolutely, square footage, quality, all sorts of different components go into that to kick out what that number is.
And obviously that has to be neighborhood, right? Because I mean, if I'm talking, there's some older neighborhoods. So the replacement of those houses, right, isn't as much as some neighborhood that's new, or is that not true?
Yeah, so not true, right, at all. But you might have quality issues, but so if you're talking location, now we're back more into a land value situation,
Okay.
right? Because the land value might be worth more here versus there. But a home being built on this parcel,
New, you have to build new.
which should be the same, would be, equal, right?
Okay.
So, but that being said, an older home is gonna have more depreciation. That's kind of the next component to this,
that's
right?
it.
So once we figure out what that cost is, and that's the actual replacement cost new, insurance companies use that same thing, right? So what is the replacement cost of my home? Okay, here it is,
Okay.
right?
So that's a value that's not shown here, but we'll get that in a second. So, and then this is when we start talking about depreciation. So that's something that's unique to probably Nevada. I don't know. Is there any other state that does?
Well, so we are a modified cost approach to value, and that is by itself unique to Nevada, right? Across the country. So we are, again, the land of the market plus the replacement cost. So that alone is unique.
Okay.
We are the only state that does that. So now we add a component to it, the modified. We call it modified because the depreciation that we add to that replacement cost, backing out value, is statutory at 1.5% per year per the age of the improvements, up to 75 years, or up to 50 years, I'm sorry.
75%.
75% can be taken out of your improvement value. So if you have a home that's 50 years old,
Your taxes are awesome.
your taxes are lower because of that calculation. So if you have a home that's 50 years old, you're getting 75% depreciation taken out of that replacement cost. And so we end up at what is being shown here is an improvement value, but it's the depreciated replacement cost new.
So just to give you an idea, on mine, this is all public record. So just keep in mind that all this is public record, so we're not trying to hide anything. So mine is, the value they have is $389,000, but my house is 20 years old. So then, or 22 years old, I calculated before I came in here, times 1.5, that's 30. That's the 30 of the 75. So if you take 389 divided by 30%, it comes out to like 1.2. So that's the real number. Is that the cost that it would to replace my house plus the RLA?
Oh, you're talking about 1.2.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that would be.
And that's closer because people don't understand. At least I didn't until I started looking at this. So, but this is the number that's all in after it's depreciated. So,
Okay.
a little tip out there, or is when you're searching for a home, you might want to consider a home that's 40, 50 years old, because you get that depreciation on the property taxes. So
it's a big difference. It's a very big difference. We're not market value. So you might have one home that's worth $1 million, another home that's worth $1 million, and they might have substantially different taxes because one house is.
So if you buy new, what is that? Do you know what the approximation is? I know you're not a tax guy, but do you know what the approximation percent of a new home is? Because I mean, obviously, how do they?
Well, so in theory, okay,
1%.
They say 1.2, right?
Okay.
So that's all theoretical. In theory, yes, because we are a cost approach value, you would think that a new home we would be at 100% of it would be a market value, right?
Yes.
Because it costs this much and we have the land at this
Zero
much.
depreciation.
But that being said, we're still using Marshall and Swift cost indexing, which is behind. It's a little bit in the rears. They got to collect the data, publish the data, get us the data, then we put it into our system. So there is a delay in that, let alone knowing local markets, right? And so it's kind of a strange thing. But if we have a new house today, we put that on the rolls. Like, how do we compare if that house sells? We can do a sales ratio to that, right? We say, okay, here's our value in comparison to what it actually sold for, and we have a sales ratio out of that. And oftentimes we're just way below it, right? And
Right.
so Nevada is unique, and also as a taxpayer owning a property, in my opinion, it's a very favorable environment for a person paying property taxes.
That's
So,
why people are moving here.
yeah.
Part of it.
Yep.
Okay, so we have the real land value, the land value plus the buildings in improvement, and that's the depreciation. So now we're moving down to total taxable value. So this is a little deceiving in my opinion, just because I'll go into it in a second. But that leads me into another question: what is the taxable value?
So the taxable value is exactly what we just went over. It's land value plus the depreciated replacement cost new. So it's land value plus your taxable improvement value equals total taxable value. It's not a market value.
And he has that on here. I think we talked about that. Beautiful, because people get all fired up. Oh my God, this is the market value of my house, and that's where
No.
if
Yeah.
you took out the depreciation, yes, right, or approximate.
We would be closer, but even at that, I bet you we wouldn't be at market, right?
It's a little different, and I think that you point out something is that the depreciation tables or the people who calculate all the replacement, if they're 6 months behind, inflation was raging 6 months, so it's probably still higher. That's what I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we saw a huge amount of increase to the cost this year in Marshall and Swift, and that's because of that lag time. But as you know, you go to Home Depot, you go to anywhere, all of a sudden, it's up 30%, right?
Right.
We saw on average an uptick of about 15%, right, in those costs. So
Okay.
it's not even technically accurate in that way, because we know that it's just much higher, but it's, again, to the benefit of the taxpayer, it's great. It was roughly about 15%.
So we're going deep dive here, but this is all great.
Yeah, that's a deep dive, yeah.
Because I'm an engineer, so I kind of like the numbers, so I'm like calculating these. So, total taxable value. Now we're going to talk about previous tax cap value. Now this is I think this is a new line item,
Yep,
right?
it is.
And my question is, leads me to what is the assessed value?
Okay, so let me just jump back into the total taxable again, where we talked
Okay.
about not market, right? So when we say not market, if you were to sell your house today, I think it's very important that when you are looking at that value, that taxable value, by law, we cannot exceed market value. So if your market value is hopefully we'll never get there anytime soon.
But it probably did, right?
During the recession, this was an issue.
When
So
prices dropped 40%. I'm guessing that it did.
yeah. So
Interesting.
When you're looking at your value, make sure that taxable value doesn't exceed market value. If you believe that it does, call our office, right? Because we're not allowed to exceed it. So
I can't imagine that there's anybody in that situation.
Probably not. Not at this point in time.
Not in this market.
Not for many years now. But it is something to look at. It is something that if you do have just a question, we want to make sure that we don't. So
That's a great point.
So okay, so diving into your next question there, with the assessed value, the assessed value is just 35% of the total taxable value. So in statute, we determine a taxable value. In this case, almost $600,000.
Yep.
We apply a statutory assessed rate to that, bringing it down, right? So 35% is statutory assessed rate that we apply to it. So this is just going to be 35% of the taxable value.
Okay. So, but I'm on one above it. What is the previous tax cap value?
Okay,
What
so
is
we
that?
have a tax cap value in there. This is, again, new.
Okay.
And we changed the form this year to
It's better,
explain
yeah.
this information.
Yeah, that's good.
But what we really have started finding out is that, a lot of times through all the years that I've been here, a lot of times we get the phone call. Everybody's calling us about the taxable value and the increase to it. And first of all, they're comparing it to market, which we're not. So we have that conversation. But then ultimately, we always end up telling the bigger, broader story of, okay, what's the tax cap? Because the tax cap is actually the value of which you're paying taxes on. So a lot of this stuff that we're showing you here is almost irrelevant. It's not because we want our records correct and we have to follow the law, but there's a tax cap in here. So this was implemented AB 489, which goes back to 2004, 2005. The legislation put in place a tax cap, right? So there's a cap on taxes.
Which is
Let's be clear on that, okay? So as a primary residence, it could be up as high as 3%. That's typically what it's at, is at 3%.
Yep.
Okay, if it's not your primary residence, so anything else, vacant land, commercial, rentals, those kinds of things, certain rentals, I should say.
Yes.
But it can be as high as 8%.
Okay. So 5 spread difference.
5 point difference there, right?
Yeah.
Spread difference. And that's a big difference, right? That's a really big difference when it comes into your taxes, especially if it starts compounding, right?
Yes.
Over the years. Historically, luckily, the high cap, so we call it low cap, high cap. Low cap being the 3%, high cap being up to 8%. Looking at it historically over the last 10 years, that high cap and that low cap, that margin of difference has been very small. So it hasn't really been that important, right? I mean, it is, but it's been 4%. But as we start reaching up to the max,
Yep.
6, 7, 8%, it starts becoming a bigger issue. And we just want to make sure that people are fully aware of what their tax cap is, right? And so
Okay.
we put this in big bold letters here. Here's your cap value. Here's what taxes are actually being based on. What you can see, it's actually quite a bit less than what the taxable value is, right? And so we don't know what it's going to be for 24-25 year, because that tax cap's going to get set this spring in June.
Okay.
So, but here's your value. You know, if you want to just make an assumption that it's 3%. If you want to make an assumption that it's 8%, you can easily calculate out what that
Great.
is. And we're calling it a cap value because we're actually backing it in from taxes, right? So as we can go forward into taxes, taxable value, applying the assessed rate, so we get an assessed value, then we apply the tax rate, so we end up at taxes. We can easily go back into it backwards too, right? Saying, okay, here's what the taxes were, we're capped the taxes, now we back out with the tax rate, we back out with the assessed rate, and we can end up at a capped value.
There you go.
So that's what that is.
But the interesting thing is the total assessed value. So now we're taking the 600,000, which is the land plus the building, taking 35% of that, and we're getting to essentially 210,000.
Yep.
That's the total assessed.
That's
value.
your total assessed, and again, that's 35% of your total taxable value. So you know, I mean, just talking about this with you right now makes me kind of think that there's a little bit of confusion there because we're saying that this is what it's based on, but there's still 35% you got to apply to that tax cap value to arrive at what your assessed cap value is, right?
Yep.
So it's an interesting note that as we're just talking here that you know you start thinking about how to make things better. So
Clear, but I mean that's why we have this discussion. But and then to be clear, the total assessed value can't be more than. So this is last year. Sorry, this is and then. So if I take 3% of this, I should get 216, correct?
Yeah.
As it goes up.
Well, no, because again, we're talking about our value that we're coming to, depending on what land values do and improvement value. So as those increase, this could change independently. Okay, because the tax cap is a cap on taxes.
Okay.
Not a cap on value. But if you have your capped taxes, you can back into a capped value.
Okay.
Okay, so this is not a capped value.
Okay, sounds good. And then question. So this is one of the most important things. I would say not recently, but in the years past, I would say about 30 to 35% of our clients, before we were involved, for one reason or another, their primary residence is in a high cap. And it was a raging thing. Ask Joe came on.
Yep.
And a lot of people, I'm sure you got a lot of calls. And so this is a very important part of this form is you want to make sure if it's your primary residence that it says low qualified primary residence cap.
Correct. Yep.
Because the difference is 3% versus whatever it is, 7 or 8%. And once you have it on there, right, it's compounded. You don't get to go back, correct? Maybe you get to go back for 12 months.
Yeah, you technically have a finite period so we sent this out, right? Now we're going to enter what we call the reopen. So if there's going to be any kind of new buildings, additions, changes to the roll, permitted, unpermitted, we have this what we call a reopen period. So those changes will change. We'll send them amended notices, but it does give an opportunity for somebody that might be new to a house or there's a transfer of ownership, those types of things to come in and apply for that abatement and get it changed in time.
So you should be checking this every year. One of the most important things is make sure that this is.
Yeah, and this is not gonna, in Washoe County in our office, we're not gonna reset this every year to where you have to call us every year, right? We don't want that. Once we get the information, we've determined that it's your primary residence. We're gonna keep it that way until there's a change in ownership, a transfer essentially. So,
But I do see, and this is a whole other discussion that we can have some other time. Another reason to get is if what happens when it's a rental. Because it depends on what the fair housing rental feds have for rents.
Yep.
If you're below that, then you don't have to pay high cap and you're in the low cap. If you're above that, so there's a whole discussion on that if for investors, and maybe that's a different discussion where.
Yeah, no,
But you have to go track down what the fair housing HUD rates are for Washoe County.
Yep.
See if you more than that, if your power bill's included in that, and if you're above that, then you're paying the high cap.
Well, and so I think it's a good point that you bring up because 100% you can qualify for a low cap with a rental depending on what your rents are, right? And so, but in those situations where you do have a rental, we're actually sending you a form asking
Right, we
you
get
to,
forms for all rentals.
yeah, and say, okay, let us know what your rents are, and we'll manage that, right? We'll look at it and say, well, you qualify for a low.
And
Or
correct me if I'm wrong. I think you guys send if you're in the high cap, you get a form sent out to you saying
every year.
you're in the high cap. So don't just throw these away.
Yeah.
A lot of these got lost with the Christmas cards, so don't throw that away. But yeah, that's an important thing. We're scooting down here, and then it says to the last line. It says new value added assessment rolls falls outside the tax cap. What is that?
Okay, so if you just go down that next line right there, it'll tell you, the new value may be added due to new construction, discovery, or improvements that were not on the assessment roll, or a change in actual authorized use. So that just simply means that, okay, throughout the year, or, even off a reopen, you get an amended notice that you've made some sort of an improvement, maybe. Maybe you did an addition, maybe you had a remodel,
Okay,
maybe you did a porch roof, or a lattice covered porch or something to that extent. But it also could mean that you did nothing that you didn't even know about. We just did a discovery process. We went through an error review. We go through the neighborhoods and we say, okay, we looked at this parcel, this parcel, this parcel, and we picked up new improvements that may have been made without a permit. Driveways or porches again, kind of more of those exterior type things, yard improvements essentially.
That would be here.
That would be here. So we were bound, to do a discovery, and so that's how we do it. And so sometimes you would see that value there, and so if you have questions with that, again, of course you can always call us. Oftentimes people know what they've done, but sometimes they see a value there and they're like, I didn't do anything to my property this year, and we say, well, you didn't, but it's new to the roll. And that value will be indicated right there.
Okay, so I want to circle back because I just thought of a question. So once you have your total assessed value, which in this case is $216, how do you figure out your property taxes? Is that you go to your tax code times, my case is like 3.42, and that's going to give you your approximate taxes if someone wants to know what they're thinking they're going to pay?
Yeah,
Is that correct?
well, that would be correct on the front end, right? So on the simple taxable value, we've gone through how we get to that.
Yep.
Assessed value, 35% of taxable value, and then you apply your taxes, right? Or your tax rate, I'm sorry.
And that's where you
your
get
taxes.
from this form.
Yep,
There's 3.6. Most of them, I'm just telling you right now, are 3.66. So I take that times this.
3.66, right? Which is 0.0366,
Yes,
right?
times
That's a percent. But that's the simple model. But now it gets convoluted because there's
It
the
can't
tax
be more
cap
than 3%.
Can't be more than 3% than last year.
Okay, so that's an important
So
part.
you might calculate out what taxes are, but they're actually going to be maybe lower because the tax cap that's been put in place.
And that's
right?
why this is a very complex situation, because this might come out to 7,000, right? I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
Or I'm saying it's about 8,000. But last year I only paid 4,500.
Yep.
So then at that point, if this number, their taxes that you calculated is higher than by 3%, then the 3% kicks in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there you have it. So that's the important thing.
Yeah, so you can almost see where it's half because, if you just took your previous tax cap value, 35% of that, right, and then you applied your 3%, it's basically half.
So it's a complex, and he doesn't make up the rules. He's just trying to.
We try to implement them the best we can. We want you to be informed.
Yeah.
Ken, you do a great job by doing these videos and trying to help us, deliver that message. And so, it is convoluted. It's complex. Our phones are open. Our website's great. We tried to bring more information to this forum so you could help understand it. And sometimes they say less information is more, but
No.
I don't know. Sometimes more information
And
is.
they're always tweaking this form. They've made a huge improvement since last year, so I have to hand it to you. So, what happens if someone disagrees or doesn't understand? They have until when? What do they do? How do they call?
So the first step is if you disagree with your value is to call us. We have somebody that's going to answer the phone. Our office is unique that way. We take a lot of pride in being able to talk to you. we're going to have somebody answer the phone. If need be, we're going to transfer you to the appraiser. And if they can't answer your your question or your concern, then there is the route of filing an appeal is an option, right? And so that option is, as you pointed out earlier, very short window from when you get this to when you can do that, and that date is January 16th this year. So once you file that appeal, it's basically we have a hearing in front of a board of equalization, so it's an independent board of 5 members. We bring forward our evidence of how we arrived at the value, and then we also bring in supporting information to show that we don't exceed full cash market or full cash value or those sorts of things, right, from a land
Broker's
value
opinion,
or market value.
Yep.
And so then you would have to do the same, right? You would bring forward the information that shows why our value is wrong. But I can tell you this, if you've got solid evidence of information that we just didn't have available to us or something to that effect, because we are doing mass appraisal, this appeal process allows us to take a little closer look at it. And so if we have information, we are absolutely commendable to reading it, understanding it, and working with you. And a lot of times these values can be stipulated if that information exists.
So great information. How many appeals are there? Do you have
So, I mean, out of 190,000 parcels, we've had a lot of success over the last few years, and we've ended up with about 100 appeals. So,
each year?
So that's very small, right?
It's very
small. A lot of success with that. Out of those 100, I think 50% are withdrawn just because we were able to explain the information. Another 25% have been stipulated, and then the other ones perhaps upheld, right? Or not enough information. So, but out of 100 parcels out of 190,000 parcels,
that's great.
It's a telling story that we're having a lot of success here. But the opportunity is there, and
review this form. I mean, it's your job, particularly on the low cap, particularly if you have rentals. You don't want to be throwing money away just because you didn't read this form. And a lot of people, I can just tell you right now, take this form and throw it out.
Well, I've had friends. I mean, I have friends that shoot me pictures of this, and I start questioning things, via text.
You're in the high cap. What's going on here?
Yeah. So, well, what do? Read the next step, right? So, anyway.
All right. So, last question. This is, you may not know this, but I'm going to quiz you on it. So, on the real estate contract in Washoe County, our local forms, it says in there that, because I always go over all the forms with my client, and I just went over one with my client. It says that the county may reassess your parcel upon sale.
Does it say upon sale?
Yeah, it does. It says after you close, the county may reassess your property. Is that true, or what's the?
Well, so there's some truth to that. I mean, the way you phrased it made me think. Okay, we reset taxes upon the sale of the property, which is not. That's a market value system.
Yes.
That's what
California
the Proposition 13.
1.25.
So no, we don't do that. But what we do, what you could end up in a situation whereby you have bought a house that might be, let's say, 50% complete, like a new house, right? I don't know if you're not really closing on that till it's complete, though, till you have a walkthrough, right?
Yes.
But you might end up closing on that house with the walkthrough, and your taxes on that new house because of the timing, right? Because of the fiscal years.
Okay.
Whereby
that's where it should lie.
The taxes may have been based on 50% of the value.
You're right. But it just makes clear.
So, yeah.
Because what's happened is the builder sells a house in April. And I can tell you, if you go look at the assessor's website, they'll probably have taxes of a couple $100.
Yeah.
And what that says is that when you sell, the next time around, basically they're going to reassess it.
They're going to reassess it. It's 100% complete now, so the value.
No depreciation.
Yeah, that's right.
So you're going to get hit with 1% of what the sale price is. So, thanks for coming in. Happy New Year. Anything else that we should know about at the assessor before we head out?
Always appreciate you coming in here and helping us deliver that message again.
And we'll be back in. I want to have the discussion. This is great talking about this, but I want to come back in and talk about people who own rentals, because 50% of houses in Reno are second or 50%. So there's a lot of investors out there that probably don't know anything about the high cap, low cap, looking at rates. So maybe we can talk about that.
We could do that. Yeah.
But where does that information come from? Is that the fair housing HUD rates? Is that from the treasurer, or is that?
Yeah, so we have that information. It comes from the state, I believe, actually.
But it's for Washington County.
Department of Taxation.
Okay. But we can point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that information might be on our should be on our website.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Take care of yourself, and
Yeah.
good luck with all the stuff out there.
Thank
Till
you
next
everybody
time.
for watching. Yeah.
Like our videos. Then one thing is, please share this with somebody that you think it would be useful for, because a lot of people out there, I see a lot of posts asking, oh, I got this form, and does anybody else? And there's hundreds of, a lot of stuff that's misinformation, I would say. They're saying, oh, we don't get it. So share this out with anybody that may use it and might find it useful. Till next time, you guys take care. Enjoy the rest of the week. Thanks.